Good afternoon. My name is Amy Peterson. I'm the project associate with the Child Abuse Prosecution Project here at the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. APA is a private nonprofit located in Washington, D.C., serving prosecutors as well as their law enforcement and community partners. Thank you for joining our Wednesday Child Abuse Prosecution webinar. Today's webinar, Courthouse Facility Dogs Assisting in the Investigation and Prosecution of Crimes Against Children, will be presented by Ellen O'Neill-Stevens and Celeste Walson of the Courthouse Dogs Foundation. This presentation is made possible by a grant received from the Office of Justice Programs through the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. APA is very appreciative of their financial assistance and commitment to improving the justice system. Points of view or opinions in this presentation are those of the presenter and do not necessarily represent the views of the United States Department of Justice and the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. By the conclusion of the webinar, you will be emailed a short electronic survey to complete regarding this presentation. The survey helps us continue to provide quality training to you at no cost to your jurisdiction and assists in future planning for continuing legal education. Today's presenters are Ellen O'Neill-Stevens and Celeste Walson. Ellen O'Neill-Stevens is the founder of the Courthouse Dogs Foundation, a nonprofit organization that educates legal professionals and promotes best practices for the use of these dogs during the investigation and prosecution of crimes. Prior to her founding the Courthouse Dogs Foundation, Ellen served as a senior deputy prosecuting attorney at the King County Prosecutor's Office in Seattle, Washington, where she pioneered the use of facility dogs that are graduates of assistance dog organizations to provide emotional support to everyone in the legal justice system. Celeste Walson is the executive director of the Courthouse Dogs Foundation. Celeste facilitates the scientific research in this field between the assistance dog organizations, the academic community, the courthouse facility dog handlers, and the Courthouse Dogs Foundation. She provides expert advice on best practices for the successful incorporation of a facility dog into office, child advocacy center, and courthouse settings. I will now turn it over to our presenters, Ellen O'Neill-Stevens and Celeste Walson.
Okay, I hope you can hear us clearly. We're going to talk this morning, or this afternoon for most of you around the country, about courthouse facility dogs, specifically working with children during legal proceedings. We're here from Courthouse Dogs Foundation. We've been doing this for almost 10 years now. And I want to let you know first that we have a very complete website. The URL will be up at the end of this presentation. Has a lot of resources. Please go there and read what we have to say. We provide free consultation for anyone wanting to develop a courthouse dog program. We provide this free of charge via email and phone calls. And so we would urge you to get in touch with us if after hearing this short 1-hour presentation, you're more interested in developing a program. We can help you decide where to get a dog, who should be the handler, how can you fund your program. We can answer a lot of questions for you. We're talking to you this morning from a law firm in Seattle, or not this morning, it's this afternoon now. And we're going to get started now. Please feel free to submit questions during the webinar, and we will try to answer them as we go through this material.
Okay, this is Ellen speaking. And the reason why we're here is because I want to, and I think we all should, start beginning to address the emotional trauma that is pretty much inherent in many of our legal proceedings. This is the courthouse that I worked at in Seattle for over 26 years. And during the course of my career, there were murder of 3 people in our courthouse. A judge committed suicide. There were many assaults, random deaths after people testified in court. And it is a very, very harsh environment. But I'm going to illustrate 2 cases that happened in November 2010 that impacted the entire community, or not at the south end of Seattle. So that's the courthouse, and take a look at that sky bridge that's jutting out over there. That crosses 2 blocks to the King County Jail. And there was this one case where a defendant sexually assaulted several girls and threatened to harm them and their families if they ever cooperated with the police or prosecutors. Eventually, he was arrested and charged, and at the trial, he decided that he wanted to represent himself. And when the prosecuting attorney told the first young woman that she needed to be prepared for this man leaving the table, approaching her in the witness box, and asking her questions, rather than do that, she went to the top of our courthouse and was walking along that sky bridge that you saw for 3 hours before the police could talk her down. She would rather kill herself than go through that experience. And during that time, that whole portion of the city was shut down. People were watching her from their office buildings, and activities in the courthouse came to a standstill. Another incident that happened within that month as well was a case where an inmate who suffered from bipolar disorder violated the conditions of his release, and he knew that he was going to be remanded back to prison for that. So when he went into the courtroom and the judge, sure enough, said, "You are going to go back to prison," he took his chair and threw it through the 12th floor window there and leapt to his death. So again, this was very, very disturbing to everyone. So we are here because we believe and know that dogs like Camry here, who works at a family court in Marion County, Ohio, can make a huge difference as people go through this process.
We get a lot of questions about why in the world should we bring dogs into the legal system. I want to say right up front that humans have a very special relationship with dogs that we do not have with other species. Research shows that toddlers prefer dogs to cats, and we have lived with dogs for so many years that we feel safe when the dog thinks we're in a safe environment, right? We think that dogs will bark and let us know if there is danger around us. Recent new research has particularly focused on whether humans sleep better when their pet dog is in the bedroom with them, and we have found out, yes, indeed, that's true. Your brain can relax because you know that the dog is going to let you know if there's anything you need to attend to. This is a dog, a courthouse facility dog named Karis in Kitsap County, Washington, in drug court. And the participants and the judge says the lawyers behave better. Everyone's calmer when Karis is there relaxing during drug court. And our participants, our child witnesses, don't know that this behavior, this very calm behavior, is a result of purpose breeding and 2 years of expert training. And Karis actually won't let you know if there's any danger in the environment. But we get that message subconsciously from a calm dog that we're in a safe environment. And when a child is allowed to pet a dog, it even has a stronger impact on that child or on the adult. Petting a dog raises our oxytocin level, that pro-social feel-good hormone, the same way it does when a friend sits next to you and puts their arm around you during a stressful time. So a dog is a legally neutral way to provide this comfort to a child during legal proceedings. We'd be very happy to answer scientific questions and send you a bibliography on this subject if you want to contact us. I want to talk for just a minute about what the kind of dogs are that we are talking about using in the legal system. A courthouse facility dog is a graduate from an accredited assistance dog school. The handler is a working professional in the legal system. And these two, the human and the dog, have passed a public access test. It's the same public access test that a guide dog and their handler have to pass that certifies that they are safe in public. Assistance Dogs International is the international accrediting body that sets standards for service dogs and facility dogs all around the world. The standards are completely transparent. I encourage you to go on this website and find out more about this umbrella organization if you're interested. In the United States, every courthouse facility dog is a graduate of one of the dozens of accredited assistance dog schools. I know listening in on this call are graduates from these schools and from others around the United States. Very briefly, these dogs are the result of purpose breeding. Just like if you wanted a duck retrieving dog, you would go to a hunting kennel to get that dog. You would not take your German Shepherd to go duck hunting. These dogs come from the North American Breeding Cooperative, or from individual breeding programs run by the assistance dog schools that have chosen for more than 40 years to choose a dog that's compliant and quiet and is ready for this work. During their neonatal period, they use a lot of the same techniques that the U.S. military does to produce a true working dog that is resilient to stress. Dogs have a sensitive period up to the age of about 4 to 5 months when they must be socialized to anything that we want them to be used to later in life. That's the problem. A lot of people have asked us, gee, wouldn't this be a great job for a rescue dog? Well, no, it wouldn't, because dogs are comfortable with what they've been exposed to very early in life. The assistance dog schools are very careful to expose the dogs to children, to loud noises, to elevators, to everything they're going to expose during a working dog's life. These dogs are puppy raised either by loving families or in a prison system with furloughs out to families from the age of about 8 weeks to 18 months of age. This picture is a Canine Companions for Independence class near Sacramento, where the dogs are learning that if they ignore these enticing things that are happening around them, they're going to get bacon or chicken or something, or their handler is going to run back and hug them and praise them for being good dogs. This takes a long time. Then the dog goes back to the campus of the accredited assistance dog school, typically for 6 to 9 months of professional training by certified service dog trainers. They're trained every day, and they're observed closely over that whole period at least some of the schools that we are most familiar with. After this very lengthy process, about half the dogs are good enough to graduate to a working career. So you're getting the cream of the crop. This is Molly, our facility dog, and I just wanted to tell you what she is not. She is not a pet therapy dog. I know some of you may have heard about therapy dogs in the United States, and these are dogs that are someone's pet. And when they're around a year old, they go to classes with their owner, and they're trained and registered by one of many, many hundreds of organizations to be a therapy dog. And the owner, handler, and the dog go to visit in hospitals or at assisted living facilities or in libraries under very controlled circumstances. Therapy dogs have to be used in a certain way for their insurance to kick in. They have to be used usually no more than 2 hours a day. The handler has to be on the leash. It has to be something the dog is happy doing. If the dog becomes stressed, they need to be removed from that situation because they're a pet dog. They're not a working dog. It's not fair to the dog to make them do things they don't want to do, of course. And so that is what we call in our country therapy dogs. And also Molly in this picture is not a service dog. She is not working with one person to help them overcome a disability with which they're living. Molly is trained and expected to work with many people during the course of the week, and her handler is the facilitator. So Molly is a facility dog, as are all courthouse facility dogs. The handler, after the dog goes through this 2 years of training and is ready to be placed as a dog, then the handler usually goes onto the campus for a period of 1 to 2 weeks and goes through a team training very much like what a drug dog police officer would go through to learn more about how to handle the dog. And when they come back to the office, they're ready to work. So this is Tibet in Florida, one of our very favorite dogs around. I want to let you know that each of these dogs, though they are true working dogs, live with their handler, and after hours, they usually have a fantastic life. They are wonderful pets. This is Astro, who works at Monarch Children's Justice Center in Olympia, Washington, and our dog Molly. And the dogs get to play. They get to go swimming. They have a wonderful life off hours. But facility dogs come to work every day with their handler, and they're there when you need them in the office. Right now, there are 147 courthouse facility dogs working in 35 states in the United States. There are 29 in Canada, and we're very happy to say the very first dog in Europe will be going into service sometime this next year. They are in the application process for a dog.
So we're switching over to Ellen here, and I have to say that I think that the presence of these dogs in the legal system is most important when they can provide service to children at child advocacy centers. That, especially during the investigative phase and in particular forensic interviews. So there are so many different types of child advocacy centers. Celeste and I have been to many of them. They all have different structural components. They try to be child-friendly, but nevertheless, it's always kind of a scary situation for a child and family member to enter through those doors, no matter how child-friendly it seems to be. The one thing that is really nice, especially when at the very beginning of the child entering into the facility, is for the dog to be introduced to the child. There, we teach the professionals working at the child advocacy centers the best way to do this, and just briefly, that is to make sure that there is signage in the lobby letting people know that the dog is there. The permission must be given from the parent and the child to see the dog. You want to find out if there's any allergies or fear of dogs. And it's at that point that the dog could be introduced to the child and family member. And this is a wonderful way to establish rapport with the child. They are frightened, mom is frightened, and it is a nice way for the dog to distract them through that process. But the really wonderful thing about these dogs is that during this time, and it's really important to take the time before a forensic interview to try to establish rapport with the child and the dog, is that you can give the child the opportunity to really feel empowered by being able to make choices about what the dog will do. The other thing that's really nice is that these dogs are so well trained that you can teach the child to give the dog commands, such as sit or shake, and it's really nice for the child to be able to do that with the dog. Quite often the kids will look over at mom is smiling, the child feels important, and it puts the child in a very good frame of mind before the child goes into the forensic interview room. We ask the child if they want the dog to accompany him or her into the room. Many of the children hold onto the dog's leash as they walk the dog back in there, and then often give the dog the command to jump up on the couch. We like to have this model in a forensic interview because, as Celeste mentioned, the child benefits the most from the presence of the dog when they have close physical contact with the child. So again, they are in control of the dog being on the couch and being comfortable with the situation right from the beginning. The other thing that we've found out is that these dogs are very useful during forensic medical exams or just the physical exams that are given at many child advocacy centers. There was concern initially about the dog's hair being found in samples taken by the medical care professional performing the exam, but that really hasn't been an issue. We arrange for the dog to lie down beside the child, that the child can hold on to the dog's leash. At the Monarch Child Advocacy Center in Olympia, Washington area, we have the nurse practitioner is one of the dog's handlers. So she gives Astro there the command to just lie there. And it's a nice distraction for the child. And what we have found is that the medical exam times have been basically cut in half. And it is just something that is a much more pleasant experience for the child. So we have found that the dog being present during forensic interviews and in medical exams has not really created any legal issues in and of itself, but we have to be careful about inadvertently creating those issues. So it is very important for the lobby of the Child Advocacy Center to be very child-friendly, but as many of you know, a defense attorney can often attack a child's statement by saying that the child is making this story up. So we think it's pretty important for the dog to not be given human characteristics, not dressed up in funny clothes, and not have, here's an example of a mural at a child advocacy center. And again, this would afford a defense attorney an opportunity to say, this was all make-believe. Here you have a dog reading a book, and here you have a cat playing with a car. So, of course, you know, this child is in the mood to create her own imaginary story of what happened. The other thing is it's very important, as I said before, not to give the dog human characteristics. There was one coloring book that was made for a child advocacy center, and in the coloring book, it had pictures of Emma swearing to tell the truth and dreaming of being a superhero. It's important just to give the dog characteristics. Here is another issue to be concerned about. Don't ever use the dog as a bribe. Don't say, if you come back into the forensic interview room with me, the dog can come with you. There have been cases even where in child advocacy centers, giving children stuffed animals is considered to be a bribe. So if you keep that in mind, to just give the dog human character and not to give the dog human characteristics, that will save you a lot of issues when the case goes to trial. Now, perhaps the most important thing that we talk about is the dog assisting a child during the prosecution of crimes. And getting back to my theme about really legal professionals needing to pay attention to how traumatic this can be for children, I believe that this is something that we have to educate judges and lawyers and advocates like yourselves, that this is something to be terribly concerned about. The ACE study was done several years ago now, and it showed that child abuse, neglect can actually impair a child's brain development and their social development for a lifetime. And several years ago, the Department of Justice wrote a handbook for juvenile court judges, urging them to take that into consideration when trying to decide how to tailor a sentence or some sort of probation for an offender that has been abused or neglected. Well, I'm in total support of that, but I think it's also time for the judges to pay attention to the fact that it is very emotionally traumatizing for children to go through the process of testifying in court. Just this past spring, in February 2017, it came to our attention that the American Academy of Pediatrics wrote a policy statement that basically says that this is emotionally traumatizing for children. And the article is wonderful. It outlines the history of children testifying in court. It gives tips for pediatricians about how they can mitigate that problem if they become aware that a child is having to go through that experience. And it also makes reference to our organization, Courthouse Dogs Foundation, as one effort made to mitigate this trauma that can happen. So you all have, as we saw that we have a wonderful audience out there from many areas in this field, and you're all educated about trauma and can appreciate how difficult this is for adults to go through, let alone children. And so we feel that it is important to deal with this and make this known to the judge in a pretrial hearing beforehand. Now, the biggest concern is what the impact of seeing the dog is going to have upon the jurors. The defense attorneys have legitimate concerns about one of these dogs being in view of the jurors during the course of the trial. They are legitimately concerned that the jury may feel more sympathetic towards the witness, may feel that the presence of the dog gives the child more credibility or makes the child appear to be more vulnerable. And so that is something that has to be addressed. One thing that's really important is that we treat these dogs as professional dogs. American society loves dogs. We humanize dogs. We think they're very cute. But in the legal arena, they have to be professional dogs wearing a vest and be trained to act in a professional manner. So even it's very hard for humans to resist doing this, but I was a little taken aback that our presentation was advertised in this way, because it's this sort of view of these dogs providing this assistance that kind of undermines how important this is and makes it look really too cute. So we want to have these dogs be invisible during the course of these proceedings, and we'll be talking about how that can be done. The other thing to be aware of is what you call the dog in front of a jury is also very important. So if the dog were referred to by the prosecutor, defense attorney, or the judge as an advocate dog, that could be very prejudicial because, again, the jurors hearing that this particular witness has a special advocate dog and how somehow that enhances the credibility of the child. If you're to call the dog a therapy dog, a defense attorney could say, well, I object to that, grounds for a mistrial, or this is an issue on appeal, because when the jurors hear the term therapy dog, that's a comment on the evidence, and it implies that the witness or the child is in need of therapy as a result of what happened. So it's important to have a neutral name for the dog, and that's why we like the term facility dog. Now, the pretrial hearing is very, very important for this matter. When we go out to train on site, we want everybody to be aware of what this practice is about. So it's important for the judges to be aware of what this will look like in a courtroom, the defense attorneys, and the prosecutors. So what we recommend doing is outlining all of this in, we'll just say, the prosecutor's pretrial brief. So on our website, as Celeste mentioned, there is a legal section, and in the legal section, it has all of these recommendations that I'm going to make written down there for you to look at. But in the pretrial brief, I believe that it is important for us to start documenting for the judge and the appellate courts the science behind the need for this dog. And we could start off with that policy statement from the American Academy of Pediatrics. This is an issue that needs to be addressed. This can happen during the course of a trial. You have a child in the witness box just feet away from the defendant with a judge, a jury, and they get easily overwhelmed by this. Especially, and this has happened this past year, there have been 3 or 4 cases where the defendants have elected to cross-examine themselves, and they end up cross-examining the child, which is very, very overwhelming for a child to go through. So attaching that policy statement or any of the other articles that we have on our website about how traumatic this is for children to go through is good evidence for us to have. So attach that to your brief. And then the other thing is now I'm so happy to say that all of the appellate courts that have reviewed this practice have determined that this accommodation is appropriate if certain conditions are met. All 9 of those cases are on our website. We have links to the entire opinion, and in many cases we have the trial briefs or, the appellate briefs of the parties involved in that. The objections that the defense attorney is going to have usually is how this is going to be done in court without the jurors being able to see the dog. And we have come up with a formula for that, and I'm happy to say that in the very most recent appellate court cases where this has been examined, the prosecutors that have followed our advice about how to handle this have received positive endorsement from the appellate court judges. So what we suggest during the pre-trial motion is discussing that it is very possible for this dog and the witness to enter into the courtroom outside the presence of the jury. The jurors should be in the jury room during this process. These facility dogs are so well trained that they can just lie completely quiet on the floor. Many of them go to sleep during the process for 2 or 3 hours while the child is being examined by the prosecution and the defense attorney. And then once the dog and child are situated in the box, the jurors come into the jury room. Now, it is important for the jurors to be aware that there is a dog present in the courtroom. Early on, we had judges telling the prosecutor that, yes, it would be okay to have the dog present in the witness box, but the jurors cannot know that there is a dog there. And a number of situations came about where this created some problems. In one case, in the county north of where we are now in Washington, during cross-examination of the child, the defense attorney accidentally spilled his glass of water into the witness box, and it went on the dog, and 2 or 3 people rushed over there to clean up the water. And it would have been quite natural for Stilson, that dog, to have gotten up and been, startled by what had just happened. And if that had happened, the jurors would have seen the dog, and that would have to have been addressed, possibly in an appeal. The other thing that I have to say is things happen. We have to remember that these are dogs, and as I mentioned earlier, quite often these dogs fall asleep. And you all know what happens when that occurs. Our dogs can be very audible snorers. Some of them have dreams where they're kind of yipping and there's some motion going on there. So can you imagine how distracting that would be for that to happen in the middle of the trial, especially when the jurors don't know that there is a dog in there? So what we recommend doing is having the judge tell the jurors that there is a dog in the witness box, the purpose of the dog, and that the presence of the dog is not to impact their deliberations whatsoever. That jury instruction should be given at that time and also at the end of the trial. And on our website, we have some sample jury instructions that judges can consider or prosecutors can suggest be used. So I want to show you what this can look like. This is in Sarpy County, right? This is Manny, and I understand that Manny's handler there and Lee Polikoff are in the district attorney are in the audience there. This is Manny practicing with this child as she testifies in court. And this is a child that saw her uncle murder her father, and Manny's presence there made all of the difference. So most of the the witness boxes, pretty much conceal the dog, but when that does not happen, we recommend that some shield be put up, and we've had some success with completely concealing the dog in the witness box with the shield there. Now, this isn't always possible for the dog to remain out of sight. This is Willow, and her handler, Tamara Martin, is in the audience as well. So Willow was doing the best she could to keep her body inside there, but every once in a while, you know, a paw or a tail might creep out. So one thing that I want to point out to you is that it's not necessary every time for the dog to be in the witness box with the child. Other arrangements could be made. If the judge does not want the dog in the courtroom, the dog could be present with the child before and after testifying. So just that time with the dog during that situation can make the child feel more relaxed and confident. The other thing that would be possible would be for the dog and the handler to be in the gallery in view of the witness, with the child being able to see the dog. And as Celeste mentioned, just seeing a calm dog is very calming as well. And then during the pretrial motion, I think it's very important to talk about why the dog would be a benefit to the trial. And the other things that could be brought up are other considerations. And what most often comes up are allergies, concerns that maybe the jurors would be allergic to the dog, or the defense attorney or the defendant are allergic to the dog. And at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Celeste to talk about that.
I wanted to go back for just a minute and mention, because we have gotten this question specifically, when a facility dog is in the witness box, it's off leash. It's the child or other witness has the leash. The handler is in the courtroom in case anything should happen, but the handler does not have to be near the witness box, and that's a wonderful thing about using these professional dogs. I did want to say just a couple of things about allergies. This is Tucker at Kapiolani Women and Children's Hospital in Honolulu. But this is illustrating that having a dog present is accepted by the National Institutes of Health everywhere now. Dog allergens are everywhere. I don't know where you are all listening from. We're in a law firm in the Seattle area, and I'll guarantee you if we swabbed the carpet in this room or any of the chairs, they would be covered in dog allergens. And that's not because they have a dog here. They don't. It's because the tiny microscopic allergens from dogs stick to pet owners' clothes. So every soft surface in courthouses and schools and hospitals are covered with dog allergenic particles. And a lot of research has now shown that having an actual dog in the room doesn't statistically change the number of canine allergenic particles because there are so many. We're happy to send you an article if you write to us or call us. But it's one thing for a person who's allergic to hug a dog and bury their nose in the dog's coat. I certainly wouldn't recommend that. But in terms of having a dog present in a public space, it's not the case that the defense attorney or the defendant or a jury member is going to have any more of an allergic reaction than they would anyway walking into that public room. So there's really not any basis for someone to worry about that. Now, if you're considering developing a program and you want to be the handler and you share your office space with a very allergic person so that they would be there constantly and everything they handle would be covered with dog allergens, then you might want to swap offices. You might want to have one hall in your courthouse where the dog doesn't go down so that people who are very allergic can stay at some distance from the dog and not be tempted to pet them. But allergies have not turned out to be a problem anywhere.
Oh, our research paper.
Yes, we have a paper that we can send to you about this if you contact us. I did want to mention one other thing. Because Muslim children cannot have dog saliva on their hands in many sects, this would not be a logical accommodation to offer to Muslim children until you've checked with all of their caregivers that it would be all right. So if you have a really high population of Muslims served by your child advocacy center, this might not be the very best program for you. In every child advocacy center or victim witness department, a best practice is that the dog is kept in the handler's office in a crate with, of course, water, chew bones, all sorts of fun things, but that no one encounters the dog by surprise. It's not the situation. The dog is never loose, off leash in a working environment. In fact, one of the standards promulgated by Assistance Dogs International and followed by all of the accredited schools is that a facility dog is within 24 inches of its handler unless it's been told to do something else. One thing I wanted to mention to you is that all the handlers that go through this process to get a certified facility dog are recertified at regular intervals by the Assistance Dog School, which provides usually the insurance for the dog. They are going to be certain that the handler is following all of these rules. So having a dog wandering around the office just encountering people, it is not part of a courthouse dog program.
Okay, so in looking at all of these appellate court cases, many of the appellate court judges were dismayed that a poor appellate court record had been made. And so we're going to talk about how to make more than an adequate record for this accommodation. So what I suggest is that the prosecutor or victim advocate or social worker pay very close attention to the child's emotional state while going through this process before the dog was on board. So they might say apprehensive, tearful, clinging to mom would be something, let's say, a victim advocate would note as she enters the lobby of the Child Advocacy Center. Then the other thing, once the dog were introduced, and if the child positively reacts to the dog during that period of time, then I think it's also important for the advocate to make a note of that, because your prosecutor is going to want as much evidence as possible about why this child would benefit from having the dog present. And many of the appellate court cases have really discussed that, they really feel that there needs to be a bond between the child and the dog, that you just don't meet the child on day of testimony and say, here's your dog, and feel calm. And it is very important for them to have a bond together. But you have to be able to back up that claim that they do that. And that can be done by having everybody involved document. So a detective, a prosecutor, victim advocate provide some information in the form of witness testimony in the pretrial hearing or by affidavit that this dog calms this child down. And not only that, but this child looks forward to coming to court because of the dog's presence. So be sure to make a record of that, and we'll get back in a few minutes to the importance of doing that. The other thing that you need to do is, assuming that your motion's been granted, is make a record of the dog's behavior in court. Defense attorneys have argued that the presence of the dog was distracting, and there was no evidence of that on the record. So prosecutors, you should make a record of if the judge doesn't do that, is that the dog were completely quiet in the courtroom and was unobtrusive and out of sight of the jurors, et cetera, so that the appellate court judges are aware of that. Conversely, a defense attorney should make a record of the dog's behavior as well to support their claims. So this is an important piece and something that the judges have underscored time and time again. And then it is also important for the judge to consider both arguments and make a good record of his or her decisions. Many of the early appellate court decisions had to find that the judge made an implied decision that it would benefit the child to have the dog there. You want the judge to be very out in the open. This is why I think this accommodation is appropriate, and this is the reason why, and then outline some of the information provided by prosecutor's office as to why the child would benefit from the dog. So there are, I mentioned the 9 appellate court decisions. Washington and California were the first 2 states to look at this. First came up in Washington state, my state, where the dogs began working to begin with. And interestingly enough, the appellate court decisions there found that the moving party, the prosecutor, had to make a show that it was necessary. There was a necessity for the dog to be present with this child in order to better able this child to testify in court. And then after that, the judges went to the other end of the spectrum and said, no, really, we think that this is within the judge's discretion, and cite evidence rule 611A, that the judge has control over how the trial is going to be conducted. This is a way to prevent any undue harassment or, fear in the child. And it's been very interesting to see even the most recent cases in Ohio and Texas, that they have come down with this finding that it's within the judge's discretion. But that's not to say that the prosecution can just lay back and not worry about it. I think you should go through all of that information about why it would be helpful for this child to have the dog present during that process, even if it is a lower bar in your state. For those of you who have facility dogs in your states that don't have appellate court decisions, most definitely bend over backwards to make a great record about how the child would benefit from the presence of this dog. So again, on our website, we have explained for the judges and the lawyers how these cases have broken down. And a lot of the cases hold all of the evidence or the facts of the case to provide guidance to you about areas that you should focus in on. So the bottom line, this is a dog, Lincoln, that's a very noble name for the dog, at Fauquier Commonwealth Attorney's Office, Fauquier County Commonwealth Attorney. So we see this as a professional dog working with these professionals. They go to work every day, and this is our best practices model. We've been doing this for a number of years and just feel that this is the best way to provide great service to our children in a legally neutral way, and in a manner that avoids, raising issues on appeal or grounds for a mistrial. So we have a bunch of questions. Celeste, did you want to say something?
Right. I just wanted to go on to some questions that have come in while we were talking, as well as having been sent ahead of time. If we can just go back and forth. I want to say, first of all, that this is the URL for our website. Our contact us page on this website has our email addresses and our cell phone numbers, and we will get right back to you if you want to call us or email us. A recent question that came in here is multiple handlers. So I did want to tell you that most of these dogs that work at child advocacy centers especially actually require multiple handlers. That is, if you're the forensic interviewer and you're what's called the primary handler, that is, the dog goes home with you at night and you're the main caretaker for the dog, that's great, but you can't go on and handle the dog at court. So you're going to need a victim advocate or a family advocate as a secondary handler. If you are the victim advocate or a detective or an assistant DA and you're the handler, you're going to need the forensic interviewer to handle the dog during the interview because you can't be in there. Now, one or two people usually go through what's called team training to learn everything about the dog. But many of the assistance dog schools are now understanding about forensic interviewing and are allowing the primary handler to watch via the one-way mirror or the video feed while a forensic interviewer handles the dog in that very limited area of just the forensic interview room, because the forensic interviewer only needs 4 or 5 commands to get the dog onto the couch and to keep them there. These dogs are so well chosen and so well trained, the worst thing they're going to do is fall asleep while the child is snuggling with them. So it's not a high-stress environment in there. So you're going to need 1 or 2 or 3 handlers for your dog to be effective to accompany the child through different processes. We've gotten one quick question. Somebody wrote in and said, are there dogs in LA? And I wanted to let you know that in Los Angeles, Bert and Skippy from Assistance Dogs of the West work in the DA's office. They're fantastic dogs. If you write to us, we'll be happy to introduce you to their handlers. I wanted to go back for just a minute to the liability question that is, and we hear this a good bit from Child Advocacy Center boards of directors and also from all the prosecutors at the DA's offices. You've got to be sure your dog is covered by liability insurance. And just be super careful to educate yourself if you're using a registered therapy dog. In order to be covered by the therapy dogs organization's insurance, the handler, typically this is true for Pet Partners and for all the other major national organizations that we work with, the handler cannot be employed where the dog is working. Even if the handler says, okay, I'm not working right now, I'm coming in the evening to volunteer, that's not good enough. The handler can't work there. The dog can't work more than 2 hours a day. It has to be on leash. We have a difficult situation around the country where people hear about this and bring in a pet dog, a registered therapy dog, and we've had a lot of problems about that. The handler needs to be with the dog even in the forensic interview. So now you've got the forensic interviewer and you've got the dog's handler in there, which isn't a best practice. So I would just encourage you, if you're looking into this, to please get in touch with us. The facility dogs, while they're worth $40,000 or $50,000 when they come to work with you, many of these organizations place the dog with you free of charge. They provide the training and the ongoing oversight for the dog free of charge. The schools that do charge a little bit charge a tiny fraction of what the dog costs. This is a very, very cost-effective program for your organization. Ellen, did you leave anything out that you for sure want to cover maybe?
Well, just getting back to the insurance issue, which is a big issue when we go out and try to convince court administrators that this would be a good program for the courthouse, is that the facility dogs are certified, the teams are certified not to create a public hazard. And most of their liability insurance policies provided are 24/7. That's in operation all the time. So even if someone were to trip over the dog, the insurance coverage would be there. Getting back to the requirements for pet therapy dogs, it's just important for everybody to be educated about which type of program they want to utilize. But if the handler has the dog involved in a 3 or 4 hour trial, they have gone against the rules of that therapy dog organization, and that could very well mean that if anything were to happen, there wouldn't be any insurance coverage. I think there have been a couple of times where judges have ordered the volunteer owner not to leave the dog in the witness box and to let go of the leash, because the defense attorney objected to the volunteer sitting up by the witness box in addition to the dog as being too prejudicial towards the defendant. And if that volunteer lets go of the leash, again, there would be no insurance company coverage. So it's just important for everybody to be aware of those issues when deciding what would be the best thing for your office.
So we had a question come in now about how do you get buy-in from judges and other courthouse personnel, and I have to tell you that's what we spend a lot of our time doing. We have a best practices manual that's available on the home page of our website as a free PDF download that you can print up. We do on-site training frequently in order to talk to judges and security personnel, and we bring a fully trained courthouse facility dog with us. So we would be happy to help you with any specific situation. We had an hour conference call yesterday with the presiding judge in a new city that's getting a dog that wasn't really sure this would work for them. On our homepage of our website, you can also print out the American Academy of Pediatrics policy statement that we talked about today and a number of other resources. One thing we like to do, because we're passionate about spreading this idea, is speak at conferences around the country. I think I've probably met a good many of you at conferences. We were in Utah recently for a workshop. So we would be very happy to hear from you if you sponsor statewide or nationwide conferences to get this concept out to more child advocates.
And just to let you know, we're having our 5th annual Courthouse Dogs Conference here in Bellevue, and we have probably, at the end of September. Information about it is on our website. There will be about 30 dogs there, facility dogs there, over 140 attendees, and we'll be dealing with practical aspects of having the dog be a part of your office, information to learn more about dog behavior, and of course, legal professionals talking about the issues associated with having the dog involved in these proceedings. And we're very excited about having an expert in human trafficking talking about that it's really helpful to be very important about whether or not you're going to incorporate the dog into assisting someone that's been involved in human trafficking, because animal abuse may have been part of that person's experience, and that could be a trigger for further emotional damage. So a lot of interesting information.
Right.
Any other questions?
Any other
We're
questions?
Sorry we can't see you out there.
I know, we can't see you, but we have 2 minutes.
All right, let's go back to our questions here. Where are they, Celeste?
I don't know, Ellen, if maybe you could say just a word about using the dogs in treatment court and with...
Oh, yes, that came up. So actually this program started in juvenile drug court in 2003 while I was the juvenile drug court prosecuting attorney. And again, it was there to help these, the presence of the dog was to kind of get these kids more invested in their recovery, and that was very, very successful. Since then, this has become more of a mainstream practice. Many prosecutors' offices, in addition to having the dog assist crime victims and witnesses, also utilize their dog in treatment courts, mental health court, veterans courts. So the dog is full purpose. I have to say it's different. The services that the dog provides are the same, but it's also, the handler has to use some special techniques given how treatment court operates to incorporate the dog into that process. I worked in drug courts for 8 years and used the dog in that situation. And so if anybody wanted some information about how you would incorporate the dog into those proceedings, I'd be happy to help you with that. In Pennsylvania, 2 dogs have been placed exclusively with probation officers that work in treatment courts. And those dogs are involved in the court system there, the court proceedings there, as well as the one-on-one counseling sessions between the probation officer and the probationer. And that has been very, very successful.
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, wait a minute. We have Molly here. We have Molly here.
Wait just a minute. Let's see, I wanted to answer one question about the trafficking. Eleanor, you can answer that.
Yes.
You have to be careful.
Yes, the dogs are being used in trafficking cases. I'm aware of one law enforcement officer that's got one. He's undercover. He and his dog are undercover using the dog in that case. But yes, it's becoming an important way to get buy-in from these folks.
Right, and I think our expert who's going to be speaking at length on this at the conference just said it's very important to take a complete history with each alleged victim before introducing the dog because there have been some problems.
Okay, Molly's going to say goodbye. Molly, speak. Come on, speak. Not sneeze, speak. Good girl. All right.
Thank you so much. Please get in touch if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Ellen and Celeste and Molly, for a very informative presentation. All of our APA webinar recordings are available on our website. If you have any questions or concerns, please email us at webinars@apainc.org. Please join us September 27th for our next webinar, Ethics in Child Abuse Prosecutions. Thank you for attending. Have a great day.